Hello to you, my lovely listener. Welcome to the Soul Sync podcast. It's me, Jason Paul, and you're in the place where we shine a light on truth. We talk about the spirit world. We talk about consciousness, the universe, energy, and everything there and in between. Now, I'm really excited to bring this conversation to you with this guest. Firstly, I'll say it's been a long time in the making, and then the stars aligned and we came together. And it was one of those conversations, and it's one of these episodes that I will most certainly remember forever. And I will say I was sitting here writing lots of notes because I was having lots of light bulb moments. So the guest I've got for you today his name is Andy Byng. He's an evidential medium. He's a teacher. He's an author. He flies all around the world doing his mediumship. And he has such a beautiful way of explaining things. Now, having been on my own journey with mediumship, like I've probably said on this podcast, I have got lost in trying too hard with my mediumship. You know, am I good enough? Can I do it? Can I push my energy out enough? How do I do this? What is the technique? How do I build the energy? How do I connect to the spirit world? Why can I feel them and why can sometimes I not? You know, and you kind of get different teachers. You see different things online. I think we live in a world now where it's absolutely information overload in some ways. You know, I almost look back to the days of when I was growing up, going to the library and picking a book off the shelf, and that would be it. And even with my brain, you know, you would get absorbed in that, and you can very easily in this world now surrender your power by never thinking that you're an expert. I think there is a lot to be said for trusting one gut's feeling, and it's, you know, what I really developed with my mediumship is about trusting ourselves. You know, I believe the answer to everything we need in life lives within us. You know, we just need to ask our soul for it. We need to ask permission for it. So Andy has a beautiful way of explaining things, and this episode really is packed for value because he has a very grounded, logical, almost scientific way of explaining things, and the simplicity of it and the sort of the beautiful way he explains it just made so much sense to me. It made me really look at my own readings in quite some detail recently, and one of the big points I took from this episode is about how when I get a bit of evidence from the spirit world, how that is the sense of what that person from the spirit world is trying to say to their loved one, and to really read in to that piece of evidence, because that in itself is the essence of the message. And it made that penny drop for me, and you know, I've listened back to this episode and it really is a beautiful one. Andy also explains what consciousness actually is and what we're actually doing when we connect to the spirit world. You know, it's not just about bringing through performance, bringing through messages, getting evidence, the true essence of mediumship. So you really are in for an action-packed episode here. One other thing is he talked about the illusion of separation between worlds, and we can think the spirit worlds are far away, and actually they are all around us. It's amazing how much our eyes fool us rather than allow us to see at times. But there we go. So this is my conversation with Andy Byng. So, Andy, firstly, a massive warm welcome onto the Soul Sync podcast.
Thank you. No, thank you very much for the invite. I really appreciate it.
Well, like I said to you, you've become much requested, actually. I feel like it's an honour to have you on, given the emails that I've had over a period of time, because you know, you're well known for the work that you do. So it's a delight to have you on. So in the course of researching you are, maybe I'm introducing you. Would you like to introduce what you do, perhaps?
I'll leave it. I'll
leave it to me.
Yeah, I'll leave it to you.
Okay. Well, so I know that you work as an evidential medium, as a tutor, and you know, host courses, and you're here, there, and everywhere. And when I was doing research into you, you know, one thing that was really sort of slapping me in the face, so to speak, is the philosophy. And even, you know, one of the statements I came across here is that mediumship isn't supernatural, it's natural. I now know that to be the case, but, you know, that's a hard lesson learned. It was through, you know, a very long time of trying to connect to spirit, which was the problem. So I guess, you know, I want to start there with you, really, about, you know, the philosophy and, you know, about your views and, where you are in your headspace these days. Well, I say headspace. That's the wrong thing to say, isn't it? Where are you in your heart and your soul, Andy?
It's been, well, to be honest, this has been a period of time of deep reflection for me. My wife at the moment's sort of 38 weeks pregnant, so we're expecting a daughter in the next couple of weeks. And of course, it sort of makes you start to reflect on where you've been, but also how you want to parent. And of course, that then makes you kind of look at your philosophy on life and what is it that, these last 22 years being involved in spiritualism, what has it really taught me? And I think the thing where I am at the moment is a realization that where we might be going wrong within spiritualism, but also within mediumship more generally, is we're forgetting that there's this great message about life, that actually mediumship and communicating with those who have made that transition called death, it's just really a catalyst for change within an individual. That is that I hope that through the evidential mediumship that we provide and that we deliver, that we might be able to open your mind to this sort of spiritual reality that lives within yourself. So, if we're providing this evidence that, your nan's passed away and she survives, your mum or your dad or your brothers and sisters, if we recognise that that's happened to them, then it makes us question, well, what's our soul then? What's the purpose of my own existence and the nature of my existence? And really, for me, that's what mediumship is really about. It's not about proving life after death. I mean, it seems a very redundant thing for 200 years, the spirit world giving contact after contact to prove something to you that one day you're going to know for yourself. It's
interesting you say that, because that has been a thought that I've been having a lot recently, because the way I see it is the spirit world, and recently I found this out myself, could do many wonderful, great things to help us. Most of the time, we're downright oblivious to what they're doing because we're in our own heads half the time. And proving life after death is really it's the sort of most basic thing that they can do in some ways. That is the entrance criteria to proving that we exist. But and it was going around in my head recently thinking, well, yes, spiritualist churches, why do I never find myself going very often? It's because a lot of the time, if you're not getting a message, no one in that room is touched by the spirit in those sorts of circumstances. So I've started asking myself a lot of questions about mediumship and how it's used. And, again, I think that one of the most beautiful aspects of mediumship is trance. And that's, kept behind closed doors for only mediums to see.
Yeah, I think, this is the thing about mediumship overall, is that when you're looking at something philosophically, so whenever we're talking about philosophy, it's not just a word that describes a belief system, because there's many words that you can use to describe a belief system. It's actually about viewing the world, exploring the world in a very particular way. And the thing about philosophy is it's interested in answers that go beyond definite knowledge. So it's actually interested in answers that science doesn't really or can't, by its very nature, provide answers for. Questions like, what's the nature of the human condition? What is love? Is there a God? So on. These aren't questions that science can actually answer.
No.
And with philosophy, though, rather than appealing to some sort of sacred text or authoritative opinion or experience, it looks at common experiences that we can all have. So this would be our everyday experiences, what it is to be human, our interactions. But also for the medium, it also incorporates the mediumistic experience. This is something very unique about mediumship, is that it objectifies a mystical experience. If you think about the mystical experiences in a more traditional sense of the word, let's say someone goes to a church, they're an atheist, they pray to God, they experience God, and then there's this sort of transformative experience that they have. It's a purely subjective experience. Only the person, the mystic, can have the experience itself. With mediumship, the medium is the mystic. We're having a mystical experience. But by being able to relay these sort of factual pieces of information, we actually extend the boundary of the mystical experience to include the audience that are present. So mediumship is an invitation into a mystical experience. And this is what you've touched upon in what you said, is that, well, look, only the people that have a message really get something. Well, I don't believe that to be the case if you're actually witnessing real mediumship.
Yes.
A true medium will be able to emanate the power of the spirit, and this is, we can go back through all sorts of spiritual experiences of the past, of even Jesus. Jesus at the Sermon of the Mount. If you think about it, he was on top of a mountainside, 10,000 people, no microphones or amplification. So if you're the 10,000 person at the back of the crowd, you're not going to hear the voice, but you were touched by the presence of the spirit. And that's the same with mediumship, is that through the expression of the mediumship, that presence of the spirit person, but also the power of the spirit world as a world, emanates, and that touches something, and actually it can ignite something within the individual. Now, lots of people don't, well, historically, if you ever kind of read someone by the name of William James was a philosopher, but he's also considered to be the father of psychology. He did a lot of work on mysticism, and he wouldn't necessarily agree with me that mediumship is a mystical experience, because he argues that a mystical experience has to be transformative. And of course, for the medium, when we do a contact with someone, we're not transformed by it. It's merely an interruption in our experience. I can't say that every time I do a contact, I'm now renewed, But James, I think, got it wrong in a couple of ways. The first way, that mediumship does have a transformative impact, but not necessarily on the medium, but on the audience. And I don't think he really saw mediumship or understood mediumship. No worries.
Sorry, I was trying to wait for a convenient time because my alarm was going off from this morning still, and I thought, I'm not fully paying attention. I've just got to go and sort it out. Typical Jason. Carry on, because you were making very interesting points, sir.
So what James I think overlooked is this idea that mediumship can be transformative to the audience. That actually, he didn't acknowledge that mediumship invites the audience into the mystical experience, and it objectifies it. And so mediumship can be transformative to the audience. But of course, transformation doesn't have to take place in one moment. It can take place over a period of time. And I think that's the other thing about mediumship for the medium. Yes, it can transform the worldview of people that perhaps are not open to that spiritual reality. And that's the main purpose of mediumship, I believe. But when I look back over 22 years of my own journey into mediumship, it's definitely transformed me. But I can't tell you the exact moment that I was transformed. It's been something that's happened slowly over a prolonged period of time. And of course, that's just a different type of transformation that we can experience.
What you're saying is very interesting, because I do feel exactly the same thing. And the point I was making slightly in jest about it's probably more about the mediums in that I sort of saw in those early days of, because I often think to myself, if I'd have been, hit with sort of very good quality mediumship in those early days, I would have probably got to mediumship a lot quicker. But my own granddad was a medium, Andy, and I still wasn't a believer. But I take the point you're saying about the evidence, because without the evidence, there is no mystical experience. Because even if you try and explain to someone that you've had a sign from the spirit world, it means nothing to that person. Even if you say, "Oh, I saw this number plate," it's not hitting and touching that person. It's about, I guess that's the thing with mediumship. It's about how that person feels as a result of that. how it
Yeah,
touches them.
Well, this is the interesting thing about mediumship, I think, is that you're completely correct. A traditional mystical experience can only have authority over the person that experiences it. For instance, if I experience God and I say to you, you say, Andy, do you know, does God exist? And I say, well, yeah, of course he does. Well, how do you know? Well, I experienced it. I can't expect my experience to have authority over you that now you believe because I had an experience. But the thing about mediumship is, and this is why it objectifies the mystical experience and can have authority over other people, is that if I'm in a room of surrounded by people that I don't know, and I say, okay, well, I've got your dad here, his name was Walter Smith and he was a butcher, and the person says yes. Well, that can now have some authority over everybody because it's been objectified. They're now part of the experience. And not only just part of the experience through the evidence, but like I said, if it's good mediumship, they're part of the experience through the experiencing that presence for themselves. And that's the difference between mystical experiences, more generally speaking, it's these sort of traditional subjective experiences, and mediumship is that by the medium is able to invite other people into that mystical experience. And that's what now, hopefully, is this catalyst for change within a person that makes them now start to question their own spiritual reality. And that allows them to go on their own spiritual journey then.
Because I guess I say most people, I must stop talking in sweeping generalizations, but someone comes across evidence, you would hope then that plants the seed that life is eternal, and then they start to believe life is eternal. I guess the thing is they then, start perhaps realizing, to live life more by a way of love and abundance, not in a scarcity mindset, which is, I guess, the way the world runs at the moment. We do need to get back to the way of the land, but I think we're very far way away from that, Andy, at the moment, it feels like.
Well, I think the first stage is actually just perhaps setting our kind of expectations a little bit lower for people to begin with, is that we have to give people time just to actually acknowledge and experience the power of the spirit for themselves, because ultimately, and I'm very much a believer in this, that until you find God for yourself, that transformation can't genuinely take place. And what I mean by finding God, I don't mean having to go to a church or praying, or I think you can find that power of creation in lots of different experiences. I think you can find it in music. I'm sure you've listened to music sometimes and you're overcome by this sense of being connected to all things, that you just get caught up in a moment.
Oh, if it's a good song in my car, Andy, I'm connected to all sorts. I can tell you that.
But it's the same with perhaps watching a sunset, or being within nature, or a particular moment that exists between two people. There's these sorts of mystical experiences that we're talking about happen within our everyday lives. But the first thing I think is about being open. A person can't just have a mystical experience. That there has to be this preparation of the body and the mind to receive.
How would you describe that? What is that preparation?
Well, this is exactly what sitting in the power is really, and meditation practice is really doing. The first thing, and I think this is the key to all mediumistic development, is actually being able to maintain and achieve a state of stillness. And again, this is something that perhaps your listeners might be interested in, because people often become mistaken as to what stillness really is. Often people think they have to have a blank mind.
Sat in the lotus position with my arms like the Buddha.
Exactly, but you can't have a blank mind. René Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am." What Descartes was sort of touching upon is this sort of first principle of being human, that we're thinking sentient beings. So when you think you're not thinking, you're simply thinking that you're not thinking. So if you're trying to have this sort of complete blank mind, it's never achievable. But a stillness doesn't require a blank mind. A stillness is a state of awareness where you're aware of what's going on around you, You might be at the beginning, you might be aware of your own body. You'll definitely be aware of the breath. You'll be aware perhaps of noise and sound and so on. But what's happening in that state of awareness is that you're not thinking about anything in particular. Right? So there's this awareness of what's going on. It's awareness of yourself, of the sounds, of things, but there's not a particular thought that's happening in your mind. That's the stillness.
Well, this is half the problem, though, because I spent a very long time in my own development trying to... Well, the mind was the problem. I just can't stop thinking thoughts. And very interesting you say that it's not trying to stop that, because actually you're not trying to stop that, because if a thought comes into your thought, that could be a valuable download of sorts. What you're trying to do is not, I guess what you're saying is not attach to a thought or not be in a thought process.
Yeah, so what you're trying to essentially do is suppress your own mundane thoughts. So for instance, let's say you're sitting there, and this is what people will often experience in meditation. They're sitting there and the thought comes of like, have I fed the cat? Right, that's just a thought that comes. You have to learn to be able to acknowledge the thought, but not now hold on to it, not go into the thought itself. Like, if I fed the cat, well, was it tuna I gave them? Was it cat food? I think cat food.
Yeah, let me go down and stroke her, my lovely, beautiful cat. Yes.
And then you kind of get into this whole story in your mind, right? That's what you're trying to avoid. What you're trying to do is if a mundane thought comes into your mind, acknowledge it, but then allow it to let the thought go. And what you find will happen over time is the space between those mundane thoughts coming into your mind will lengthen. And that's the stillness, the moment between thoughts. That's the stillness that we're trying to achieve. And eventually through practice, and through discipline and focus, we are able to maintain that stillness for a prolonged period of time. I very much believe that you have to actually be able to maintain it for an hour and a half. If you're doing a demonstration of mediumship, within that stillness, that's where the mediumistic phenomena is actually occurring.
But it's quite funny because you're saying stillness, but then you're, in a very active state.
Stillness of your own mundane thoughts.
Oh, right. Okay. Yes.
The suppression of your own mundane thoughts. And then within that stillness now that's been created, this is where this is where you're becoming conscious of the mediumistic phenomena that you're having. So when people often in the beginning of their development, they worry about, am I making something up? Am I creating something? And what that happens then is they get scared of their own imagination. But actually, it's the imagination that's allowing the mediumship to take place, or allowing you to become consciously aware of your mediumship. When we create something, in inverted commas, it isn't that your imagination has been overactive, because your imagination is overactive in the mediumship. That's the whole point. It's that, imagine that you've got, we'll use our cat analogy again. You've got the communicator that's there. You've created this stillness. You can imagine, if you want, like a square box. And in that square box, that's where the mediumship is manifesting. So you've got this auntie who's had no family. She lives by herself. She'd lived by herself for a long time. And then the mundane thought, have I fed the cat, invades that stillness now. And all of a sudden now you're aware of a cat. So you go, well, she had a cat? No. Well, she had hundreds of cats? No. But it's not that you're creating, it's a moment of where that stillness has been disrupted by something. And that mundane thought, one of your own mundane thoughts, has now come from a suppressed state into an active state and is now mixing around with the mediumistic experience that you're actually having.
How does one navigate in those early days? Because that, I like to think now that I'm getting towards a stage where I can differentiate between the two, but it can still trip you up at times. And even what you're describing there with the stillness and the quietening of the mundane thoughts sounds like the practice of meditation. And then this is where people get, confused. And, this is the thing, Andy, I could go down a million rabbit holes here. I really can. when I'm sitting in the power, I am the power. So I'm not trying to be something I'm not. So the act of trying to build the power in itself. So, what where I'm getting to with this here is, so really, if someone wants to work on their power, they shouldn't be focused on trying to build their power, because they are the power. What they're trying to do is allow their mind to quieten enough so they can experience what they already are.
So I think what I've no, it's a really good question. What I've learned about mediumship over 22 years, and this is a problem, is that we use terms, but no one actually actively defines them. And there's not actually a sort of consensus of, when we use the word build a power, what do we really mean by it? And
this is the problem. I was sitting there for ages trying to build it, sitting there.
See, when we talk about building a power, it's not really that you're kind of building this, like, you're kind of creating a battery of power. It's actually about becoming more aware of it. It's about increasing your awareness of it. And this is what the phrase build a power is not really helpful. It's
but this is the difference, because a lot of teachers, I've only come to realise recently, that you get teachers that sort of teach from intellect and the head with technique, and then you get people that sort of teach them a way that really is from the heart and is, one of the most difficult things about mediumship is the damn simplicity of it. It's the simplicity of it that makes it so complicated and hard. And, I'm now spending most of my life, Andy, I'm learning what I learned in the first part of it. Yeah.
That's what I spend most of my time teaching. It's not teaching, it's unteaching.
Unlearning.
Unlearning is what I spend most of my time doing for people. So look, what I think let's just talk about this, because I think it's really an interesting thing. When you've said, okay, look, what you're doing then is a bit like meditation. No, it's you've got to see mediumship, as I've said, as a mystical experience. And like I said, in order to, a mystic can't make a mystical experience happen. All you can do is become receptive to it and allow it to happen. You can receive the experience. You can't actively engage in it.
Mm.
Part of that, if you look at every sort of spiritual tradition and mystical tradition, including mediumship, where does it all begin? With stillness. Because what you have to realize is that when you're engaging with the spirit world in communication, your soul is having a perfect experience. But there's a gap, isn't there, between what your soul is experiencing and what you're becoming consciously aware of.
Mm.
And it's that gap, which is bridged by the imagination. That's where all the problems are. Over the last sort of 22 years, I keep saying after 22 years, but throughout my whole work with my mediumship, and I've been teaching now for about, I'd say, 15 years. What I've noticed in every contact, and I think my students probably get fed up with me saying this, there's nothing wrong with the experience itself. It's very rare that I actually see a student creating evidence. It's very rare. What I'm seeing is a student,
knowingly or unknowingly,
both.
Oh,
what it is that we don't trust the experience that we have, and we emit things. So again, what we've experienced doesn't actually make its way into the words that we offer. So
yes.
It's not that we're creating things. There's actually nothing wrong in terms of blending and becoming aware, and the experiences manifesting within us. There's actually no problem there. The problem is between the gap between what we experience and what comes out of our mouth.
You touch on something interesting there, because it reminds me of a recent experience I had about a year ago, where I had come into my mind sort of a man hanging outside an Italian restaurant with sort of some, like they do outside, where they have the sort of tomatoes and everything out the front. And what happens to me, and I now know this happens, is the first thing I do when I get a bit of evidence is goes up there into the head. And then what comes out my mouth is, oh, I've got a man outside a classic, whatever restaurant. And then my friend who is a medium said, well, did you think about going into the restaurant? And I thought, oh, no, I never thought I could do that. And then before I knew it, I was in there and I'd done the most best reading. But the problem is, and it's interesting you say that, because it just made me think of the amount of times where I've got the evidence and then what's happened is I've tried to place it or do something with it. And the funny thing is, I wasn't even aware I was doing that for over a year. I wasn't even aware that I was even consciously doing that. I thought that was just coming straight out.
Yeah. So look, we've talked a bit about now, like the nature of the experience, but what I think which helps you to understand this part properly, is that we've got to move away from this idea that as mediums, we're there to give evidence. Like, the evidence is a natural byproduct of what we're experiencing. We're reliving a part of someone's life who's now passed away. Right? So the evidence just happens. You haven't got to worry about it. It's present. What is it that we're actually experiencing? Well, I've realized that in every contact that we do, there's a need. And if you put yourself into the shoes of the spirit person, which is actually a much better place to be than to put yourself in the idea to think about mediumship from the point of view of the medium. If you was in the spirit world today, you'd be wanting to do two things. The first thing you'd wanting to do is to actually
track you down, Andy, would be the first thing I'd be wanting to do.
Well, what you'd want to be doing is you want to make sure that your loved one knows it's you.
Yes.
Me. Right. But secondly, you'd want to say something to them. If you was in the spirit world today, Jason, and you was able to communicate with someone that was left here, you wouldn't want to say, Jason, I run a podcast.
No,
you'd want to say, I love you. Or you'd want to say, look, I know you're going through a hard time with my passing, but keep going. Right. So the problem is that sentiment, that actual thing you want to say, you have to achieve both of these needs at the same time. Knowing, getting your loved one to know it's you, but at the same time, wanting to say what you need to say. And this is the intelligence of the spirit world, that every moment within your mediumship experience is curated. In other words, what I mean by that is that the spirit world choose a particular part of their life experience that will help, that you'll know by the end of the contact that it's them. Because only one person in the whole room will understand the experience, the life experience that's been brought forward. But the experience itself that they share is moving the medium to understand what they've come to talk about. That the message is within the evidence. Now, when we start to think of mediumship in that way, what you're essentially doing is you are reliving a particular moment within the communicator's life. So let's say, for instance, you had a communicator, use your example, who owned a Italian restaurant. Now, he comes, because he was known for his Italian restaurant, and that was a big part of his life.
He was actually, that was the biggest part of his life.
But secondly, and this is what you'll find, is that the thing that you'll share is something that encapsulates you in some way, right? But
myself as the medium.
But also, you'll also realise too that it may be that the recipient is also having some difficulty with their work, or needing to find something, direction within what their big passion is in life and how to make that a bigger part of their life. There's an intelligence there. They share this particular part of their life so that to meet that two aspects of that need, that it is, I am who I say I am, but also the evidence, the message is within the evidence that I'm already expressing.
I've never heard anyone explain that concept before. That's very interesting, and it makes sense to a lot of my contacts recently. Yeah,
so when you think about it now, think about a moment in time in your life. Think about this moment in time. There's two different aspects to it, isn't there? There's the material world, things of the external world around us. If I was reliving this moment in time now between the two of us, let's say you was in the spirit world and I was your medium, I would be becoming aware of like, you know, you've got an on-air sign in the background, you've got a fish tank, I could explain, I could relive the room that you're in, the objects, but also where the house is, what area you live in, what you did in the home, so on and so forth. But the other aspect that I could relive and touch upon is the qualities that you express within that moment. Right? So this is why, if you look at a contact of mediumship, it always contains the subjective and the objective, the personality, how we express ourselves in that moment in time, and also the practical evidence, which is really the external world, you know, where we become aware of what's around us, because all we're actually doing is we're reliving a moment in time. And this is where people go wrong. And this is what you was talking about earlier on, is that you go, I've got your friend in the spirit world. He had a restaurant, yes, and then you start to look for the next thing. Whereas actually, what's happening is the first impression that you've had. I've got your friend and he had a restaurant. That's the part of his life that he's sharing with you. So
it was because he had, I don't know why I'm so passionate about telling this man's story now, but that restaurant was where the people had their wedding celebrations, the family. That was, you know, it's.
But this is what I'm trying to say. Rather than saying, okay, well, my job is to give you all this evidence of different parts of their life. No, relive the moment that they're sharing with you. And that's what you did in that contact. That's why it worked, because you actually surrendered and followed your communicator. You're not trying to go, okay, he had a restaurant, now trying to look for something else. He shared that with you. And now you're actually allowing yourself to unfold that aspect of the life that they've shared.
He was actually inviting me into the restaurant, and I was turning the other way, Andy, and walking away, looking for the next piece of evidence.
And that's where lots of people go wrong with the mediumship, is because in their minds, they've been taught and conditioned to think, my job is to give you all this evidence about different parts of your loved one's life. Whereas what I've always been what I've been teaching for a long time now is, no, we're just here to relive the moment that they want to share, and recognizing that moment, that first impression that you have, is a moment that identifies who your communicator is. It's a part of their life that will be poignant and meaningful, as it was for you in that contact, as you unfold that restaurant. But it's also leading the medium to understand what the message is.
It's really, what you're saying is very, it sounds simple, but at what point, because you've obviously mentioned you've been teaching this, but how did you come to this realization?
Well, I remember I used to work in a church called Stourbridge.
Very
well-known church. And I was fortunate enough to serve there when Eric Hatton was still with us. We used to get like a couple of hundred people in a Sunday service. And there was a guy there called Ron, who was on the committee. And Ron was a really nice guy. But he was always the sort of guy that after you did a demonstration or a service, he always had something he wanted to share. Right. So I remember after one particular day, he's come up to me, he's like, Andy, can I give you a bit of feedback? And you had no choice really with Ron. You just had to go, yeah, by all means.
Take it on the chin, as they say.
Yeah. And he said, well, the first thing is you need to start wearing a ring. So that when you can, like, you've got something to play with, like you can actually just like play with your ring and then you're not moving your hands all the time. I was like, oh, okay, thanks for that, Ron. Yeah, I'll think about that. Yeah, nice. I said, but do you know what I really like about your mediumship? I said, what's that, Ron? He said, well, tell a story. I said, when I listen to your mediumship, I really feel like I've got to know the people that you've communicated with. And it's not just like random bits of information. Everything actually sort of tells a narrative. And that was like a light bulb moment for me when it come to like storytelling and understanding this sort of natural unfolding of a contact. I was doing it myself without thinking. It was just what I was doing. He sort of made me aware of that. And then what I started to do is obviously I started to look at my own contacts, the contacts that I was giving, and I realized that the good contacts, the ones that really worked well, I was unfolding a particular moment in time. So I might be like saying like, okay, your dad used to do work on cars. Yes. then I'd be going, okay, well, I thought he used to do it in his garage, and he'd have these manuals on the top shelf with all the how to fix things up, and he used to have little jars of screws and stuff that he used to let. And when I used to do that and allowed that moment in time to come alive, the contacts really worked, and I realised it's because I'm now surrendering. I'm not trying to force my way through looking at different parts of their life. I'm accepting what it is that they're sharing with me. I'm allowing them to lead the way, and I'm just following them on the journey that they're taking me on. And of course, it made me realise that if I was in the spirit world and I had perhaps this once in a lifetime chance, because it's true, you got to think of it that way. We take it for granted that we have to do all these contacts, but in the audience, that man or woman might only come once to a demonstration. That means that for their mum, it's the only chance they ever get to communicate via a medium. If that was that one, I had 10 minutes, I had this once in a lifetime chance to communicate. Wouldn't the first thing that I say be the most important thing?
Yeah.
So what does that tell you? It tells you that your first impression is the most important thing. It's the part of their life that they would want you to share. And let me just, I know I'm blabbering on now, but hopefully it's interesting.
No, this is very, very interesting. It's making me think myself, about lots of different things.
I thought about this long and hard because my dad, very close to my dad, and I have these sometimes these morbid thoughts. Well, if I passed away tomorrow, like, how would he cope? Because my dad has had a bit of a difficulty with alcohol over the years, and he's not touched a drop of alcohol for the last sort of 5 years now, 6 years. But if I passed tomorrow, I would be really worried that he would turn to the drink and undo all the stuff he's done. And I'd be scared that he would just give up on life. Right now, when I look back through my relationship with my own dad, since from the age of 10 to 6 years ago, when I moved to Canada, me and my dad went fishing together every week, probably 2 or 3 times a week through my whole life, like 20 odd years of fishing together. So if I came back from the spirit world, I would share with my dad fishing, right? Because that's what embodies our relationship. But I wouldn't just share every moment of fishing together. I would share a particular moment. I'd share a moment where it was I remember it being, I was pike fishing, so it would have been around December time. We was on the river together, and I'd gone down the river looking for pike with the lures. My dad was fishing with dead baits and on the corner of the bend of the river. And I was walking back up to him. It's about 6 o'clock in the morning, and I was going to creep up on him and like scare him because I was what we used to mess around. And I happened to be up behind him. I looked down between his legs, and he had a bottle of cider at 6 o'clock in the morning on a crisp December morning, right? And I realised this is a problem, right? So I would share with you, if you relive that moment, you'd relive the fact that the alcohol was there. You'd relive the river, what river it was, the fishing gear that we had, what we were doing there. I might take you to different memories of different fishing trips. And what would that lead you to? It'd lead you to 2 things. For you to tell my dad to carry on with his hobby and passions, don't give up on life. Your son wants you to continue fishing and getting out there and enjoying yourself. And it would also move you to the alcohol, to tell my dad, don't drink.
Do you know what?
That's the intelligence, Jason, that you're working.
Yeah. When you explain it like that, it almost makes it feel bonkers that, we're not teaching it en masse in this way because, what's the alternative? Okay, the fishing, straight onto being a medium, and it's that experience. And again, it's about, when I even think to myself about my granddad, I've probably had 2 occasions, and he comes to all the time. He's a medium, he loves it, and I love it. But only on, I think, 1 occasion have I ever been really moved, and it was because of that very reason. And what happened, Jason, is that the medium relived the moment that you had with your dad. And what happened to you
this is the power of it. This is the power of the story, if you like, is that in that moment now, as that evidence is being expressed, you are going back through your own imagination, and you're reliving, you're taken back, you're transported back in time to that moment that you had with your granddad. And as you're transported back in time within yourself, guess what's happening now? You're touching the grief, you're touching the love, you're touching the sentiment that existed between the two of you. You're taking back to that 7 or 8 year old, 10-year-old kid, what you felt for him and what it meant to you at the time. And that's
which in itself is healing.
Exactly.
Which is what, yeah.
Exactly. That's the healing of the mediumship.
How? Because what you described there, and I think you coined it beautifully, between the subjective and the objective. How does one differentiate between the two? Is that just a feeling over time and building it with trust? But
what I've come to realize is that the most natural way. So, like I said to you earlier on, I kind of always do this when we talk to people. I kind of put an idea here, an idea there, and then we try and bring it all together. If you heard what I said earlier on, I said that with mediumship particularly, you have to look at your everyday, common day experiences. Like, philosophy is about looking at our common human experiences. Okay, and if you look, when we talk about the soul, what is it we're really talking about? We're talking about the inner world. So the soul isn't this thing. It's actually different aspects of yourself that define your inner world. So what's that then? Well, it's the spirit. That's what gives life. It's reason, your ability to reason. That's not a physical thing. That's a soul thing. Right? The spirit world are rational people. They've got intelligence and self-awareness. It's your intelligence, it's your emotion, and it's your desires. Now, if you think about human beings, this is something important, because if you look at the things I've just said to you, the spirit or the power of creation, that's where all things come from. That's what is part of the soul. So we've got reason, intelligence, emotion, and desire. If that is part of the soul, mediumship should provide evidence of that after death. Right now, and it does. If you think about it, I'll just do it very quickly. If you think about it, when you do a demonstration of mediumship, have you not noticed that every time you do it, there's people that turn up are the ones that belong to the people in the audience?
Yes.
Right. Well, what does that tell you? That tells you that the spirit world are using their faculty of reason, because they have to know, I'm Andy Byng. My mum and dad are Barbara and Mick Byng. My mum and dad are going to a medium tonight. This is the medium. Well, if I go to that medium now and communicate with them, I'll be able to talk to my mum and dad. The very fact that the people that belong to the people in the audience always show up shows you that the spirit world, the spirit people are using their faculty of reason, that reason survives physical death. It's not something of the intellect, it's something of the soul. Now, the other thing is, if you look at this is what Plato said, and I think Plato got this right. He said that the nature of the difficult thing about the human condition is that it's essentially a cycle of being satisfied followed by being dissatisfied. So we have a certain desire. Let's say we have a desire to eat. So we fulfill that desire, we take some food. Now, in that moment, you're simultaneously, you are being satisfied. You're not hungry. But as soon as your hunger has been satisfied, a new desire now presents itself. Desire to go to sleep, to talk, to work, whatever else. So the human condition is one where you're never satisfied, because as you satisfy one thing, a new desire comes to the surface. And of course, I'm using very banal examples, but these can also be spiritual desires too. You might have a desire one day to demonstrate your mediumship, but I promise you, once you demonstrate your mediumship, you'll have a new desire. Like, you're never satisfied.
Yeah.
Right.
How is this solvable with self-work, or is this
No,
just...
it doesn't need to be.
No?
What does it? No. This.
It depends what your desires are. If they're terrible desires, then you need to sort that out then.
What I'm saying is that
yes,
these desires are part of the soul.
Uh-huh.
It's actually what's allowing the soul to unfold. It's what's motivating you to experience life. Again, and this is the thing that we often don't think about. You've said, look, we all say it. You can't call up the dead. So what does that tell you then? If your mom comes and communicates with you, then what does that tell you? She has a desire to communicate.
But yes.
Desire still survives physical death. It's part of the soul.
Often ask myself a lot, Andy, about, what is it like up there? How does it work? Sometimes I read these books on trance where I'm going to mention this book now. I can't even remember what the name of it, but there was basically a guy that was an academic for years. He was very high up in the church. He wrote a book that was anti-spiritual, and then decided, well, when he passed over, that he must correct this immediately. Does this ring any bells to you?
Does it ring a bell to me?
It's a very good book. I'll put it in the description. But that really went into detail about what happens up there. But I've come to the belief, a lot of the time I think the spirit world, this is advanced planned, months in the making. And, even the act of communicating with us down here. Well, I know myself from my nan coming through. She was a very weak communicator at the start, and now she's a very strong communicator. So, elocution listens. I don't know what they do up there, but there's, something is occurring much more than we can ever realise.
Yeah. So the moment we've got, the inner world, the spirit, well, it's a different set of arguments, but Mediumship doesn't provide evidence of God, but it provides evidence of all the other things. But you've got the spirit, you've got the desire, you've got the faculty of reason. And the big one, and this is to bring back to our original point, is emotion. If you think about the emotions that you feel, the emotion is the way that your soul is consciously communicating it to itself and to you and to other people. So when you feel an emotion, is it not telling you how an experience that you've had, how it's affected your inner world?
Yes.
Right. So it's the emotion the emotion is the way that the soul communicates. It's the way it communicates with you. It's how you become conscious of your own inner world, but it's also how the soul communicates with another soul. So to go back, you've asked me, how do you know the difference between the subjective and the objective in your mediumship? Well, I've proved to you that the soul, which is this inner life that we have, the spirit, reason, emotion, and desire. The emotional part is through the emotion that the soul communicates with other souls. So within your mediumistic expression, it's the emotion that is the foundation of all things. And when we talk about emotion, we should see it that we don't just mean, or I don't just mean emotions, happiness, sadness, joy, whatever. I also mean the ability to sense. Right? In other words, to sense that I live in a forest, to sense that I get underneath the car and I work on engines. There's a sense of whatever, right? So it's through the emotion that the soul that's the most natural way that the soul communicates mediumistically with another soul. Well, two souls communicate through the emotion. So first of all, when we're experiencing personality, you don't see personality. This is where people go wrong. They get pictures and they use it symbolically to talk about personality. That's not how it is. If you really understand the picture, which I'll come on to in a minute, you'll see that it's not actually about the inner world of the communicator, because all of us have the same qualities. We all have love. We can all have a bit of anger. We all have frustration. We all have joy. We all have trustworthiness. What makes us unique is the way that those qualities manifest within ourselves. That's what makes us all unique individuals. But I can experience a sense, if I've got a sense of humor, you've got a sense of humor. So if I'm blending with you, that sense of humor can be triggered within the emotion of me, or the sense of it. So you'll find that a lot of times when we talk about personality and expressing personality, you'll sense that through the emotion. For me, what I've come to realize is that the only reason that pictures are triggered in the mediumship is because what you're becoming aware of is too complex for you to sense or feel, have an emotion of. So, for instance,
what do you mean by that? I understand. I'll get half a light bulb on there.
Okay, so we have to go a little bit deeper. And the first thing you've got to realize is that people have been conditioned to believe that the spirit world are giving them things. And when you talk about things in that language, what people often then believe is the mediumistic experiences that they're having are the exact experiences of the spirit person. That isn't the case. And your mediumship proves that's not the case, right? For instance, Jason, how many times have you done contacts where you've become consciously aware of your own lived experiences? For instance, you might become aware of your own nan or your own grandmother's home or an object that you know that your granddad used to have.
But I would go as far as saying in most contacts in some way or another.
Okay. So it can't be the exact experience of the spirit world then, can it? Unless it's your grandmother that's communicating, right? First of all, right? How many times have you had another experience where you might have said, okay, you've got a red Jaguar car. And you've said, okay, I've got your dad, you had a Jaguar car. And they've gone, yeah. You said it was a red one. And they say, no. Right, well, if you were saying that what we're becoming consciously aware of is the exact experience of the spirit world, then it's either you're with the wrong person or the spirit person has forgotten what colour car they used to have. You can't have it both ways. You can't say, well, no, if it's the exact experience, it's the exact experience. You can't then go, well, it is sometimes, not other times. No, it never is. Right? And it never is because you're consciously becoming aware of your own lived experiences. And oftentimes, when you describe what you're seeing, it doesn't exactly fit the exact experience of the spirit person. So our common experiences tell us that. So what's happening then? Well, what's happening is that as I'm blending, my soul is blending with the soul of the communicator. And through the emotion, my soul is having a perfect communication with the other soul, right? That actually, when you take away the conscious mind and the physical body, the two souls have communicate perfectly through emotion. Not just how they feel, but communicate knowledge, information, understanding, argumentation, all things through the sensing and through the emotion. So your soul is having that experience, but there's, like I said earlier on, there's a gap between what your soul is experiencing and what you become consciously aware of. Okay. And how is it that we become consciously aware of the experiences that the soul is having through the emotion? Well, sometimes if we can sense, if it's something common that it's very much part of our lived experience. I'll give you an example. How many times have you had a contact where you've had a gentleman or a woman with a heart attack or cancer? A lot.
Do you know what? I know this is a bizarre one, but I haven't actually had it that much.
Okay. You've had it once.
Normal, right, okay.
You've had it, you've experienced it.
Yes. Yeah,
yes. You don't see it, do you?
No.
You don't see it. You sense cancer.
You do.
You sense a heart attack. Why? Because it's so common that our minds are open to that. It can manifest through the sensing, through the emotion, or the sensing of it, right? Because it's part of our common experiences. Same with personality too. Now, what's happening is that the soul's having this perfect experience. We've got to become conscious of it. So what's happening is that as our soul is experiencing that, it's triggering something from our subconscious mind, which through the faculty of the imagination, we then become consciously aware of it. So every mediumship experience that you're having is that what you're becoming conscious of is actually being triggered from your subconscious mind, which is why you're experiencing your grandmother's house sometimes, or a watch that your dad bought you, right? It doesn't mean that it's any less accurate or valuable, because it's being triggered from the blending of the two souls. The soul is experiencing this gold watch. And in that moment, if it's something that you're open to and it's possible, it will sometimes you'll just get a sense that it's a gold watch. Right?
But I suppose
if it's too complex for you to sense, it will trigger a visual experience within the imagination of a gold watch. But it will be a gold watch that you've seen somewhere in your life. It's come from the subconscious mind. It's not the exact watch of the spirit person, which is why sometimes you can describe the watch and it's very similar. Other times, bits don't work. And the trick is not to be up here in your head trying to look at pictures. It's about sensing, rooting your mediumship in the sensing to understand what part of the experience makes sense to this communicator and how to use this experience. And that's rooted in the sensing, not in the picture itself.
Which is very backwards to the way a lot of people are teaching mediumship, which is where the problem is. Because I'm a highly emotional person, and for a very long time, I haven't been tapping into my own superpower.
Well, I think what has probably happened is that you've not been taught that you think that emotions perhaps are just, I'm not saying I'm not presuming this, but it's maybe what's common is that you think that emotions are just happiness, sadness, frustration, trustworthy. Like you see emotions as characteristics, personality traits.
Yeah, I see them as something on a sort of tick sheet.
But it isn't though.
Yeah.
The emotion is about sensing, letting yourself be taken to an experience, reliving the experience, becoming the communicator, the presence. And it's through that sensing that we're actually then in the room. Like you said, well, like, he took me to the restaurant. Well, you didn't see it though. You experienced it through the sensing. You sensed it was wooden. There was wooden paneling in the walls. You sensed that there was hops and vines on the ceiling. You didn't see it all. Because
I didn't. I sensed it exactly.
You're now utilising the sensing. That's when it works. The pictures only come when there's something that's so complex that you can't just sense it. And the reason why that is because, as I've said, the emotion is the natural way the soul experiences.
You're making me think, Andy, of a reading I had, which just proves this point exactly right. I had an old-fashioned bathhouse come up to me, like a Roman bathhouse. Well, I was never going to sense and feel a bathhouse. You know, that was something I needed a visual cue on. So it makes total sense.
What that tells you then is that when you're getting pictures, it's not giving you, and this is what you asked me originally, it's not giving you personality, it's giving you practical evidence about the external world. He used to go to a bathhouse. It was a Roman one in Bath or in Cheltenham or wherever it was we went with. It was, right? It's that type of information, not personality. You know, what I've noticed over the years is that when people struggle with pictures, what they try to do is do more pictures.
Yeah.
Whereas that's just like banging your head against a brick wall.
Well, you go down a rabbit hole then because, they haven't taken that. They can't resonate with that. Right, get the next piece.
Whereas what you've got to do in your development, I mean, like when you start to work with, when pictures start to manifest, it just means that you're opening yourself up now or going a bit deeper into the communications where you're touching things that are a bit more complex than you're able to sense and feel. When that happens, what people then tend to do is want to do lots of exercises on pictures, and it's like I said, like banging your head against a brick wall. What you have to do is actually take a step back and actually start to utilize the sensing of the practical evidence, not looking at pictures, but actually opening yourself to using the emotion to sense more. And what that really does is it helps you to root your awareness in what you're sensing, because this is what's probably happening to you sometimes too, Jason, is that when a picture comes, your mind is going straight to the picture up here in your head now. You're looking up.
Which is taking me completely away from the feeling.
Exactly.
You know, so yes.
So what you have to learn to do is to stay rooted in what you're sensing, and it's just a quick flash of a picture. You know, you don't. You've said this is the thing that always makes me smile with mediums, student mediums particularly, is that they go, well, I'll have to keep it alive, because if I let it go, I can't work with it. Hang on a minute, you've just told me, when did you have that contact with the Italian restaurant?
It must have been about 4 or 5 months ago.
Right, so 5 months. You had an experience 5 months ago, but you can still remember it now. So why do you?
It was so vivid. It was. It was the emotion of it.
What I'm saying to you, Jason, is like, you don't have to keep this picture alive to work with it. Once you've had a flash of a restaurant, why do you need to keep seeing the restaurant? Why can't you just now start to sense and experience it and still work within the context of a restaurant? Of course you can. And that's what good mediumship is where you're actually, when I'm working with another picture, it might just be a quick flash. I'm not holding on to it and trying to keep it alive in my mind. I'm aware of what I was aware of. I'm now sensing and having experiences to help me understand what that was really about. You know, as soon as you hold on to something, and this is the thing about the imagination, the conscious mind can't think of two things simultaneously. It's impossible. We can't do it. So when you get, and this is what happens when people get no's as well. When you get a no, or you go, people say to me, well, I'm not aware of anything now. I said, well, yeah, because you're holding on to the picture. If you're holding to the picture, there's no room in your conscious mind to become aware of something else now, because you've just pressed pause, right?
You're making me think of all the times when that has happened. Yes, many a time.
So what you have to, what mediumship is, it's about allowing a continuous experience to happen. Because in the moment that the mediumship, that you become aware of something consciously, it doesn't exist anymore. It's gone. If you think about your mediumship, when it really works, you're not thinking about it or reflecting on it. It's like that.
That's a very good point as well, about the sticking with it. It is instant, and then it's trying to labour by staying with it. That's breaking the connection. So it makes.
See what people, when it comes to the no's, what people teach just doesn't work. Hold on to the picture and feel into it, and then see what it's telling you. Well, it's not going to work because you're holding on to the picture. If you hold on to the picture, if you think about it, what the teacher's telling you is hold on to the picture, feel into it, and allow a new experience to come that's going to help you to understand what the picture means. Well, if you're holding to the picture, there's no room in your conscious mind for a new experience to come. So it never comes. You just start guessing what it might mean.
Then you start sweating, then you're getting more in your head. And
then you get tense. And then when you get tense, then you're not relaxed. So now the imagination can't actually be triggered and work. Think about it. If you're doing an exam, or I remember doing my sort of driving exam, I wasn't daydreaming and thinking about letting my mind move from one thing to another. When I was in that stressful, tense state, I was just very aware of what was going on around me. In other words, like driving in this car to pass a test. When I'm a passenger in a car and I'm relaxed and I'm allowing my mind can now wander, I can now be creative, and my imagination can be free. I might start thinking about the trees, and then next thing be thinking about world domination of being the president of the United States of America. I'm not too sure how I got from the tree to the president of the United States of America, but my mind got there somehow. That's the type of mindset that you need within the mediumistic expression. It relies on not tension, but on being relaxed. So when you start to get the no's and you're holding on to this picture, trying to feel into it, but you can't because you're holding on to the picture, it becomes a self-perpetuating thing. Then you get more tense, and then your mind holds firmer onto it, and then
You've honestly put so many light bulbs on in my mind today, Andy, because when you're talking, it's just made me, because we hold on to the readings that don't go so well, and it's glaringly obvious with what you've said and why they haven't, because I have got stuck on those items, and you've made a lot of really good points. And the thing is, Andy, you can't. This is 22 years of lived, it's a lifetime of experience to learn these very valuable lessons, and I do wish, people were taught more in that way, because I think it would really help. It's been an absolute delight. Honestly, I could have you on for another 2 hours just to talk about more concepts, but I know you must get on. It's been a delight. Andy, leave us on a final thought for your episode today.
I think for everyone out there that's developing their mediumship, I think what's really important is not just focusing on evidence in your development, but actually trying to understand the nature of the experience that you're having. Once you understand the nature of the experience, the mystical experience, and the nature of the mediumistic experience, you begin to start to view things a lot differently. And so don't just focus on the technical training of your mediumship and the exercises, but really engage in a philosophical way, and not just by reading books, because lots of the books that you're going to read on this subject aren't really worth the paper they're written on. It's really about self-examination, reflecting on the experiences that you have. Looking at, go out there and seek good mediums that are really developing and expressing the mediumship to a high standard, and ask them questions, right? Ask them questions about their own experiences and how it's working for them. Because I think within this particular aspect, I think there is something in that when people that I respect as mediums, they've gone on their own self-reflection and their own spiritual journey. They've lived these experiences for themselves, and they've found their own truths, and that's what makes them good teachers quite often. But you have to become your own teacher too, and so that's what I would really encourage everyone to do is reflect on their experiences, challenge the status quo. It's really important. You know, there's certain things that are taught because they've always been taught, but doesn't necessarily mean that they're correct. And I think it's about really looking at the nature of your experiences, what your ideas and concepts are, and do they make sense? And the other thing is that if anything that you're taught in this subject contradicts your sort of common sense, which doesn't seem, hopefully what I've talked about today makes common sense. You know, it just seems reasonable, at least, if nothing else.
Andy, you are being massively modest. I've sat here with a bright light bulb on for over half the episode. So for me, it's
I think that's what you've got to kind of, if something does insults my own intelligence, then I don't really pay much attention. You know, and I think it is really sifting through to find the good stuff. And
trusting in how you feel, not surrendering your power, you know, and, you know, finding your own beliefs in you know, what's real.
Yeah. And it's really important. It's important to really deconstruct your beliefs and reconstruct them again over and over and over again, and realizing that there's always something that you've overlooked. You know, that's a really important. I do that all the time, you know.
Well, it's funny how often you can have a belief and then realise that it's actually, has turned into a limiting belief. It once was true and now is not true. And
exactly.
You do have to examine your beliefs a lot because, you know, well, a lot of us go through our lives lying to ourselves a lot. So, you know, it's a journey of self-discovery. Andy, thank you so much for gracing the Soul Sync with your presence this evening.
No, thank you for the invitation. I really enjoyed the chat, so thank you.
Now, wasn't that an interesting conversation? You can see probably why I have my pen out, writing down lots of notes, listening back to it, because he speaks with such clarity and such simplicity. And like I said at the very beginning of this episode, we can overcomplicate the process of mediumship. And really, when you strip it all back, you know, what we are trying to do is we are trying to quiet our mind. We are trying to rediscover a lot of the time what our power is. We're learning to build that power up and harness it. And do you know what? It just brought so many things back to me on readings I've done of my own recently. One stood out to me, and it was a reading where a granda came through outside a restaurant, and the essence of the whole story was I needed to feel into that experience, because that restaurant in itself was the whole message that was coming through from the spirit world. But until next time, I'm Jason Paul. This is the Soul Sync. Goodbye.